So I'm going to start on the center front of the bodice, and I'm going to pin the fabric kind of right around where the sternum is. I'm leaving excess fabric hanging out from where my line is going to be, because it's always better to have extra fabric than not enough fabric. So I'm going to place this where I think the neckline goes, and then I'm going to drape it over the shoulder, and then I'm going to spin it to the back to where the top, approximately the top of the bodice was. So remember, it was high cut, so that's going to be the top of the bodice. It's going around the shoulders, and it's going to the center front. I'll probably connect it a little bit so that it's not as low cut, remember, as the sexy photo was. Now I only have to drape one half of the mannequin, because if it's a symmetrical dress, whatever I'm doing on the actor right is going to be the same on the actor left. And that way I can be guaranteed, if I just put this on the fold, that the measurements are going to be same left and right. So if this is half of my pattern piece, I just put it on the double, and so it's like a mirror image. If it's an asymmetrical costume, then unfortunately I would have to drape the whole thing. Like if it's a single shoulder, or it's got like some kind of a poof going on or something. But lucky for me, I only have to drape the half bodice. So I've pinned the beginning, and now I'm going to be pulling a couple of gathers to add the fullness in the front of the bodice. So here we go. Pin in some gathers. So I'm pinning them in, but eventually I'm going to actually have to sew a gathering line. And I guess my skill as a draper comes in here handy, because it's up to me to determine how full these gathers are going to be. Because the actor with the pregnancy padding is already so busty. If I make the gathers too full, you know, the bust is going to get even bigger. So it's kind of a fine line, a guidance to figure out how full to make this. So this is looking pretty good here. I'm going to put some up at the shoulder to keep this in place. Okay, so we have these nice folds here. They're folded at the shoulder, and now I have to do the same on the back. So I'm going to take more of these folds. So, oh, you can't see it. So I'm adding more folds to the back, and they're going to be culminating at the center back, with where I was saying the giant old zipper is going to be going. So this is the first part. Now I have to work around the armhole and the side seam. So what I realized is I cannot proceed with this scale of fullness that I have in the front and that I have in the back. I can't proceed around the sides, because there's just not enough fabric based on the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, first I'm going to draw where the armhole is, because I like how this looks. But I'm going to have to add excess fabric in here, you see, because if I scrunch this up, it's not enough. So I'm going to have to add an additional piece of fabric. So I'm going to slit in here. I'm going to cut out the armhole. Why not? It looks great. So what I want to do is add an extra piece of fabric in here so that I can continue to scrunch it up. So I'm just going to pin that in right now. I got another piece of fabric right here. Just pin it down to the side, on one side. So now I can attach it to the other side. So the question is, do I want to make it a triangle, or do I want to just add extra fabric so it gets gathered under the armpit as well? So I think I'm going to opt for just adding a straight piece into the bodice. Okay, I'm going to trim off the excess because all this fabric is getting in the way. I'm going to continue to pin my fullness into the underbust area with my excess fabric that I've attached. I'm also going to pin the fullness under the armpits. Maybe one more here. So I've managed to control the fullness under the armpits, and now I'm just going to continue to pin out the fullness where I think the waistband is going to go. Of course, it's not exactly a waistband because it's not around her waist. It's more like an underbust band. So here we have the upper bodice, the bodice pinned out more or less. I guess this could get a few more pins in the center back here. What is this? Good. So it's pinned out. It might look a little bit, lots of fabric. So I'm just going to kind of give myself like an inch extra, and I'm going to draw like an inch below where I think the line is. That'll give me a certain amount of leeway. And I'm going to trim it. It's good to have a really nice big pair of scissors when hacking away at fabric. Take out these extra pins. Don't want to cut through the pin, dull the scissors. So here's the upper bodice. I'm liking the way it looks. I've also added the other side to the bodice just so that we can get just a better view since we're dealing with a half mannequin. So the next step is to put the waistband on. So I'm going to place this little ribbon around here just to kind of get an idea of where the waistband would lie naturally. And again, it's not exactly a waistband, it's an underbust band. But this is kind of the location where it wants to rest, you know, given the belly. But in the sketch, the band is a little bit wider. So right now, this is just 1/4 of an inch wide, which in half scale, full scale would be a 1/2 inch wide. And I think it should be wider, like, I would say 3/4 of an inch on this dummy, which means it would be 1.5 inches on a full-size mannequin. So I have my sturdy 3/4 inch band that I'm going to put around the waist, following the ribbon line that I've established. I'm going to do it a little bit loosely because the shape's going to change somewhat, and I want to give myself extra room. So, for example, this line is not going to be a completely straight line. It's going to have to curve. Right here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's too bulky. It's on the top. So I'm going to pin out see, I've put a little pin in here to curve the waistband a bit. I'm going to do that to the other side also. And this way it fits smoothly around the body. So I can take this off. I'm going to mark the center back first. And then, just to make sure I know where everything goes, I'm going to draw this line on the bodice. So this is exactly where the waistband is going to sit on the bodice. So I have a definitive line of where that goes, all the way around. And then just to make sure, I'm definitely going to mark the center front here. And then I'm going to mark on the bodice where I took this little pin tuck. Gathers in the bodice. So remember the waistband that I created? It has these two little pins in it in order for it to fit snugly around the underbust of the pregnancy dress. So I went ahead and I recut this into a curved shape. So now I don't have any extra pins that I have to get confused by. So I now have remade the waistband into a curved shape, and I'm going to place it and place it exactly where all my markings were, which is a good reason why I had all those Sharpie marks. So I can establish the center front again, and it's going to wrap nicely around the underbust and close in the back. There's the back. And I'm actually going to just put a few pins to place it securely right back on my Sharpie lines. Here, center front. See here how it's slipped down? I'm going to raise that up again. Put another pin here. Good. And now, onto the skirt. I've decided for draping the skirt, I'm going to drape the entire skirt. I could just drape half the skirt because, again, it's a symmetrical dress, but because of the pregnancy tummy, I just want to make sure that I have control over all of the gathers. That's going to go over the entire belly, and I feel if I only did half over the belly, the gathers might not look right. So I have a nice big piece of fabric. Again, it's the slinky type, and I'm going to put my first pin, I'm going to center it right on the center front, and I have the center front of the waistband also. So I'm going to pin that, and again I'm going to pin it slightly above the finished line, just so that I have a little bit of extra fabric. Like so. So now I'm going to continue to pin the pleats in, and I'm going to pin them in so that they're slightly gathered. See, I don't think that's gathered enough, so I'm going to do it a bit more gathered. So I'm going to re-pin it slightly fuller. I'm just going to place this here so it doesn't get wet. So I'm kind of halfway over around the tummy. Continue. I think the gathers should run in the same direction, I mean in the same volume all the way around the entire bodice. I mean the body. I can always adjust. That's how I'm proceeding now. If I don't like the way it looks, I can just take the gathers back out and do it again. Good. So here's the dress, the skirt. I think it's almost there. I think I'm going to make it a little bit fuller across the front. And I'm also going to kind of raise, I might have to raise where the fabric lies in order for the gathers to lie straight. So as you can imagine, I could be ditzing around for hours getting the gathers just right. So I'll tell you what, I will do that, but I'll do it between video clips. So I've pinned the entirety of the skirt onto the dress form. I began with the actor right side of the body, as you can see, and I repeated it on the actor left side. So sometimes what happens is when you're draping both the left and the right side, you decide, wow, what I did on the left side looks better than what I did on the right side. So because this is like a working sketch, all I have to do is write OK on this side, and then I know when I'm going to turn this into a pattern that this is going to be the side that I want. So again, I'm going to mark the center front on the skirt, and then I've also pinned up the center back. Now I just want to show you with the center back, I've pinned it straight up and down. So it goes from the top straight down. This is kind of a Grecian style, classic, timeless dress. So in that case, most dresses and skirts are made out of rectangles. If this were a more fanciful, like 19th century interpretation, I could make this line go diagonally, and then it could add a little extra drama. But we're just going to stick with the classic pose, so it's going to go like that. So I'm going to trim away the extra fabric. Again, gets it away. Good. And then I'm going to mark the top of the skirt. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to put the hem, adjust the hem next. So you can't see the bottom of the mannequin the way I've set this up. So I will get a sturdy platform and place her on it. So I'm just going to assume, for now, that this mannequin is the same height, half size, as our actress. So that means if I were to take the underbust, the floor measurement, this measures 25 inches. So on a human, that would measure 50 inches. So this would be a rather tall lady. So I just want to mark the hem to the floor. So I'll be doing it here. And I guess I just have to rotate the figure. So this is important to do. This is not something that you can guesstimate. It's difficult to do using math. And one reason is because of the pregnancy tummy, the front is going to stick out more than the back. So it's hard to guess where the hem is going to be. See here how that sticks out more? That means that the skirt needs to be longer in the front than it does in the back, because that's the part that sticks out the most. So I've marked it all along the ground. One more. And now I'll get my trusty scissors and I'll just trim this off. So this is a good length to have that it hits the floor, because in real life it's going to have to be shorter than the floor, because the actress is performing on a raked stage, and we don't want her to be having to like lift up her skirt every time she walks, because it'll get in the way of the action. So it's hitting the floor now, but when I prepare it for the actress to try it on, I'm going to raise it to like an inch, a half inch, well, an inch in real life above the ground. So now we're on to the side panels on this dress. And because this side is the one that's okay, I'm going to place the side panels on this side of the skirt first. So, you know, I have this piece of fabric here, and again, this is going to be the stiff fabric versus the slinky fabric, because I want this to have some kind of structure. So I have this placed here, and it's a little bit wide. And when I looked at the sketch, I kind of determined that the piece should be probably about 2 inches wide. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to press down the two sides so that it's nice and clean. So now I'm going to place the side panels on the bodice, and I just want to establish where it's going to look the best. I think because it can enhance the pregnant figure. So, you know, I think if it were here, I don't know if you can see that. If it's here, I think it's too close. And if it's all the way back here, I think it's too far away. I think where I want to place it is kind of where the tummy ends on the sides, on the side front. It's kind of like here. And again, I can check with the designer what she thinks about it. And I can always change it in the fitting. So I'm going to attach it here. And this also means that in this part of the skirt there's not going to be any gathers. It's going to be straight, because I'm going to be piecing this into the skirt. So I'll just pin this down, making sure not to catch any of the other part of the skirt. And this is going to become a seam, and it's just going to be pieced into the skirt. And I'm hoping that we can use some kind of a fun fabric, like metallic, or some kind of lace, or something just to accentuate the skirt. And it's good to do this while it's on the dress form, because I can also just use gravity and figure out where it's going to lay the best. Because right now, in fact, I kind of have to finagle the bottom down here. But I think this is going to look good. So I'm going to attach this to the other side and then proceed from there. So I've pinned both the side panels here and on the other side, even though that's not the okay side. This is the side I want to use. But I'm glad I did both sides, because now what I want to do is to be able to control the volume of the fabric that's over the pregnancy belly, because I don't want it to all shift over to one side or the other side. So I'm going to take this little strap and I'm going to attach it to the side panels like this, but I'm going to be doing it on the underside of the skirt. So that means I'm going to raise this. And you can kind of see, if this is the belly, I'm going to want this strap to be kind of around this area right here. So I think what I'll do is I'll just attach it to the spot that I want it to be located. And then I'm going to lower this back down. And then I'm going to stick my hand up here and I'm going to feel for the strap, and I'll be able to attach it to the side pieces. Here, I'll turn it this way. So here's my strap. I'm grasping it, I'm pulling the skirt down, and I'm figuring out where on the side panel this is going to fit. So it's here, like that. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And basically I'll just, because the two sides are slightly uneven, I'll just even it out when it comes to making the pattern. Good. So again, I'm going to remove these the location pins so that the skirt can drape a bit freer. So this should give it a certain amount of control in the movement of the skirt. And then finally, I want to put the waistband back on. And luckily, I made a second waistband so that I don't have to take the skirt off and dig out the first waistband. So this I can just place right back on, matching up the center front, and then pinning it in the center back. And then I'm going to mark the skirt. The way I mark the bodice on the upper half of the waistband, I'm now going to mark the lower half on the skirt, like this, all the way around, including the side panel through to the back. I'll also just mark where my center back is on the skirt, just very briefly. And then I'm also going to mark the location of these side panels, but I'm just going to do it on my favorite side. I don't really care what it looks like on the other side. So I'm marking this down here, and it can just be marked very lightly. But that's going to be the general location of it. And then I can also do like a hatch mark, just so that when I sew it on, I'll have another reference point. And then here I'll mark on the waistband where the side panel is, and I'll just write SP here, because that's going to be the location of the side panel. And now for the arm, the sleeve. First I'm going to draw a line around the armhole where I would like for the sleeve to be. It can be a little bit larger so that there's maximum mobility for the actress. Then I'm going to take this piece of fabric and I'm going to lay it over like this, and I'm going to pin all the way around the armhole. Of course, I kind of have to flip the fabric back to see exactly where that line is, but it shouldn't be too hard. So I'm going to pin all the way around the whole arm, like this, and I'm going to keep going. So I've pinned the whole circle around the arm, and like a quarter of an inch away, I'm going to draw a line where I want to cut it. And then I'm also going to draw directly on the pin line, because that's where the sleeve is actually going to attach. So there's two lines. And then I'm going to cut the armhole out following the first line I drew. So it's not going to be the actual stitching line, it's going to be the seam allowance line. This is the sleeve as pinned onto the body of the mannequin. The fullness is too much, so I'm going to pin out some of the volume. I've also slipped in an arm. And so you can get these detachable arms that you can put on a dress form. So I have one here in half scale, and so this will give me a reference point of how to manipulate the fabric to make the sleeve less full. So I'm just going to start pinning out some of the extra volume. I want to keep it somewhat full because in the sketch the sleeves gather slightly around the elbow. But as of right now, this is like a full circle, so it's too much volume. So I'm pinning out, see, pinning out all this excess fabric. Here, here. This I'm going to leave open because this is going to end up getting a slit. If you look at the costume sketch, the top of the sleeve is slit in half. And, well, maybe I'll put one pin in here just So you can't really see the difference in volume right now, but I can. So what I'm going to do is trim off the excess fabric. So this is a little less full now. I guess I'll go ahead and trim this. That's going to be the slit at the top. So the sleeve is now less full. And what I'm going to do now is tie it around the elbow. So the elbow is right here where the crook is. And then I'm going to blouse the sleeve so that it's a little bit more puffy. Right now it's just straight down, but I want it to poof out a little bit. Like that. Good. I'm going to open this up because this is how the sleeve is going to live. And then I'm going to trim this excess fabric so I can get a better idea of the complete shape. I don't want to cut through any pins. That's not good for the scissors. Good. So this is my upper sleeve. See how it's open on the top? It's slightly bloused, slightly puffy. Now I'm going to add the lower sleeve. The lower sleeve, I think I can do flat on the table because it's all about proportions, and I have a pretty good idea of how I'm going to proceed with that. So in the costume sketch, the lower sleeve is basically just a high-low ruffle. So in the front, it's short, and in the back, it drapes down. So I'm just going to take a few measurements. First of all, around the elbow, the circumference now, including all the bulky fabric, is 5 3/4 of an inch, which I'll write down, 5 3/4. And then I think in the front, looking at this, I think I would like the ruffle to be 2.5 inches in the front. And then in the back, I want the ruffle to drape nice and long. So I'm thinking maybe 16 inches. 16 inches back. And then it has to go from 16 inches in the back to 2.5 inches in the front. So I would say by the time we get to the side, it should be maybe 10 inches. So I have my following dimensions here. The circumference around the elbow was 5 3/4, and as we all know, the formula for finding the diameter is circumference equals pi d. So if you do the math for that, you have 5 3/4. And anyway, the diameter is going to be 1.83, which is about, let's just say, 2 inches. So I'm going to make a circle with a 2-inch diameter, and then I'm going to use the measurements I took to complete the outer circle. Here's my 2 inches this way. Just do halfway too. And then here is 2 inches this way. So my circle is going to be like this, and that's the elbow circle. And then remember, the front I wanted to have 2.5 inches, so that's going to be my front. By the time we get to the side, it's going to be 10 inches. Well, we're going to make it 9 inches because that's all the fabric I got. And then in the back, we're going to make it 16 inches. So that goes to here. So now I'm going to draw kind of an oval. And then this is going to taper down to a smaller circle in the front. So I'm looking at that, I'm eyeballing it, and I don't really like how it looks. So I'm going to kind of change this. And again, with draping, if you don't like the look of it, a shape, you can always redo it. So I'm going to put this on the half. And I'm going to cut my circle. First I'm going to cut the elbow hole, and then I'm going to cut the shape. I think I'm going to change it a little bit more full in the back. There, it looks like a giant Easter egg. So here's the sleeve I cut out. And now I'm going to place this on the arm. I'm going to put the longest part in the back. And the shortest part in the front. So the sleeve hole is a little bit big, but I kind of like the way it looks. It's a little bit gathered. So I'm going to stick with this size. It's a little bit long in the front, but I think I can wait for the fitting. So here's the sleeve, front and back. And here is the life-size mock-up I made for Hermione's pregnancy dress. You can tell I used a bunch of different fabrics because we didn't have a lot of slinky fabrics in the shop to use for a mock-up. You know, you want to use inexpensive disposable fabric, and so we didn't have a lot, so I kind of cobbled together a whole bunch of different similar fabrics. And here is the final fabric version of the dress. Looks pretty good, huh? The hem is a bit long in this photo because I marked where it hits the floor on the actor during the fitting. So it looks too long here, but that's because I have to hem it up to like an inch above the floor. And here's one last look at this beautiful dress. I'd be delighted to answer any questions or listen to any comments you have about this video. Please contact me at sarah.iams@brooklyn.cuny.edu. Thanks so much.